1971. I had a friend called Chaz Banks, and Chaz was working very, very long shifts. He was recently married, and he would turn up at Woodliff Street on his 125, I think it was, or maybe 175, little Kawasaki motorcycle, white as a sheet. And he'd come in, we'd make a cup of tea, it'd be like 6:30, we were still working. We were also, I've got my plectrum there, sorry about that, folks, I've got a little a 60s Jim Dunlop. I was doing quite a lot of writing as well, but the reason I was writing is that my wife, Wendy at the time, had bought me a harmonium from Shawcrosses, the auctioneers in Eccles. And harmoniums, of those of you know, people call them pedal organs. You pedal them with your feet, and they've got those lovely, lovely sounds. They've got all these names on the drawbars like diapason. You just want to know what it all means. So basically, it was a mini kind of reed pipe organ. Chaz also had early on in my first band, a certain kind, for a little while. He'd sung things like Can't Explain by The Who and The Kids Are Alright, and he had quite a good tenor, baritone voice. So he noticed that I was writing on the pedal organ, and he came up with some lines. So together we wrote a song called Falling Quite Lifeless to the Ground. And Chaz was living in a high-rise flat up at Chorlton Road, and you know, it was pretty tough early 70s. If you know, you having to work mad hard. It's not far off from the 3-day week, and people having to have no electricity and etc. and all that kind of stuff. But we kind of talked about some of the situations that some of those very young couples were finding themselves living on the 17th or the 13th floor and barely making do, you know. If you want to know me as a writer, I tend to write about the same things. I say this in other episodes, but Chaz came up with this wonderful line about, you know, how can a man keep on talking? We were concerned that politicians were saying lots of stuff, but there were still these young people really struggling to, you know, to move on in life and to make some. And you know, after the wonderfulness, if you like, of the 60s and the great promise of what was going to happen, the early 70s and certainly 70, 71, 72, up to 73, it was pretty dour, you know. I remember going down Seymour Grove and seeing 350 West Ham fans coming along, knocking people over, which kind of stopped me going to football. But I'll talk about that another time. That's another story altogether. Anyway, together I had this pedal organ, and I'd been working on writing, wait for it, a rock opera. Organ really lent itself to writing in a particular way, and I'd written Joe's Train with it and Captain Will You Tell Your Daughter, and it was all to do with like sea shanties and that kind of feeling about it, to do with seafaring and all that kind of stuff. Anyway, together we wrote this song, which didn't really fall into that bracket, but it also set me off on another train of thought. Chaz, I consider him one of my longest standing and truest friends, and helped me on many occasions as a musician. He managed the Out, he went on to look after Cannon and Ball, he went on to look after the Sugar Cubes, he went on to tour manage and sort of English manage, even to some degree, Pixies and Teenage Fan Club and the Breeders, and lots of other people that he's worked with, you know, Mighty War and all these people. So, you know, at some point, maybe we'll try and get Chaz in as a guest, and he'll tell you some of the stories, some of his great japes of going through customs like a tornado with 7 musicians and 15 techs behind him, and nothing's going to stop him. But this song is about the hardship that people are facing. write those songs, I always had these themes going in them that I wanted to. Other than that, really, the musicians were allowed to play what they wanted. They're pretty much a free hand. So, but the themes, I tended to have a big say in those because I kind of heard these melodies. Because really, I'm better at writing melodies than I am at writing words, I think. And the melodies come all the time, and the words not so easily. But with Chas having come in with this, great line of falling quite lifeless to the ground, remarking to his words, and that people were talking about trying to make the situation better, especially for young people who are recently married and not being able to find a decent place to live, and how they were being unheard by the politicians of the time, and that prompted me to kind of put some music behind it and contribute a little bit of the words. You would find that these things went into the back of your bunker, and then sometime later you realise I'd been out working with Meatloaf. It's 1982 now, and I come back and I've been out working with him as a tech, but now he's invited me out to go to Stamford, Connecticut and write some songs with him. And in order to fund me to do that, I thought I'd better put a gig together. And that song, Falling Quite Lifeless to the Ground, popped into my memory as thinking, well, this would work. And I'd been approached, I'd been working with a guy called D. Christophilus and his wife Jackie, and there was a great singer called Al Duffy, who was a fine harmonica player as well. Sadly he's no longer with us now, but fantastic voice. One of the greatest we ever had in Manchester. Great singer, Al. And there were some young players about. There was a young keyboard player called Simon Mayo, and there was a violin player called Red, and Steve Clark on guitar. And I'd known these people, and I kind of said, do you fancy doing a gig at the gallery? And we spent 3 weeks rehearsing a series of tunes. There were things like Miracle and Eyes Are Open, which was back then was called Return of Assassin, Here Come the Girls, Who Is Innocence, Broken Hearted, and a few other songs that were, Joe's Train and things like that, which I'll show you how that was written. I wrote that on the pedal organ that I've just been talking about, on the Harmonium, when I was writing this erstwhile opera. So somewhere there's a video of this show with us starting with Falling Quite Lifeless to the Ground. The band was called George Borowski Et Al, and some people call it George Borowski and the Ten Commandments, but I wasn't having that one. And at the back of the room you'll hear some, people shouting "Swoop, Swoop!" And prior to that there was a band called Captain Swoop and the Fabulous Wonderfuls. It was one of those gigs where everybody knew it was happening for some reason. I think people also knew that I was going off to go and write with Meatloaf, and there was kind of a support. I had a support of, I didn't have thousands and thousands and thousands of fans in Manchester, but I had some very kind people who came along to lots of gigs and still do. And they all turned up, and it was a sellout. And the gallery was on Peter Street, run by a guy called Peter Gresty. And the Fabulous Wonderfuls had played there, and all sorts of people. It carried on going till about 1988, and then the kind of gangster revolution thing in Manchester, all the guns, kind of put an end to it. But at that point it was a great place to go, and we got to play this song, and there's a recording of it, and it's kind of warts and all, and there's lots of chats and noise, but the audience are fantastic, and I got lucky, I got lucky. I've been lucky all the way. Thanks very much for listening. See you later.